We're going to go on now to our third finalist for this category, and that's Power to Youth. Nuno Braganca is the person behind this. But first of all, we're going to take a look at the video about how to find public funding for your SME and boost youth employment.
Hello, I'm Nuno Braganca and I'm here to present PowerToYEUth. Did you know that in 2019 there were 53 European regions where over 25% of youth were unemployed? The EU grants funding opportunities to each one of those regions. However, most young people and businesses are not aware of how to access them. These structural funds are allocated for social inclusion, competitiveness of small businesses and promoting entrepreneurship. The aim of my platform is to spread the word to young EU citizens who have little knowledge of how to apply for funding opportunities that exist to develop their own idea. To build this interactive platform, I am using data provided from Data Europe EU, through which they will be able to gain insight into how EU funding operates. Furthermore, by increasing visibility of public funding notices for inclusion, my platform will also help small businesses become more confident in hiring the youth workforce. So, join us at the EU Open Data Days and let's give power to youth.
Well, Nuno, thank you very much. Here you are. It's time for your pitch. Tell us all about your project.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to present to you the project that I've been working on, entitled Power to Youth. Next slide, please. So, let's start with the problem addressed, which is the situation of people up to 24 years old who can't find a job. Why is youth unemployment relevant to this challenge too? Because it is a deep economic problem. It resonates to a lack of creativity, a shortage of divergent and innovative thinking that young people naturally offer to the labor market. Because these aspects increase the competitiveness of small businesses, fighting youth unemployment is key to making the single market's economy more resilient to the future. Next slide, please. So, the platform is able to reach two user audiences, SMEs and young people. Once the user enters the app, it starts with a dark interface where they have to select their profile. Once they press the power button, the app lights up. Next slide, please. So, let's imagine this small family business in the south of Spain, Naranjas del Sur, which is looking to expand their workforce. They have a long list of candidates, most of which are young and inexperienced. They know that they come with initial costs to consider, related to training and supervision. So they are faced with this dilemma, because the company cannot afford these additional costs, especially now with the pandemic hit and future uncertainty. But still, they want to do good. They want to be perceived with a solid reputation in their community, in line with the current trend of corporate social responsibility values. Next slide, please. They often hear in the media about these million euros. However, how can an SME relate to those values? How can they see it from their own perspective? How can they get a view of the allocation to the theme of youth unemployment? These questions can be answered with open data. Next slide, please. So, in the tabs on the left, the user can find funding allocation. Here the user can select the past or see estimates for the next 21-27 multi-annual period. Select one of the available stats, such as the amount spent in the integration of youth by each member state. And in the same way that we measure GDP per capita, this platform will show the amounts per SME registered in each member state to put the values into perspective. So this will lead to this visualization. And you can see here that on average, for instance in Spain, SMEs receive a high value of around 600 euros. However, it is not the highest, which was in this multi-annual period in Croatia, probably because with a very low number of registered companies there was less competition for funding calls. Next slide, please. Have you ever wondered how much of these planned millions are actually spent? Well, now you can see it on what I like to call an eclipse map. Why an eclipse map? Because in these circles, the outer bright circle represents 100% of the funding decided, and the dark interior represents the 50 the 60, 80, 90, or 100% that was actually spent. These circles are represented in each member state for comparison. For instance, in Spain, they spent less than half of the initial amount, and the best performing country was actually Latvia at 97%, almost achieving what I like to call a full eclipse. Next slide, please. In the funding calls tab, the user can view recent funding opportunities corresponding to the amounts that they saw before. Here, the user can explore the EU regions where youth unemployment is the highest and select one in order to display funding calls. So, for instance, Andalusia, where the SME was located, after they make the selection, the information will be rendered. Instead of viewing the information in a long table dataset, the user can view two at a time and load more with a more appealing visualization. Once the user decides on a specific open call, they can see the source of the information in the managing authority websites, or they can also share it with their colleagues via email. Next slide, please. So if we go back to the audiences, let's see how PowerToYouth can help a young person. Next slide, please. So let's imagine Chiara. Chiara has a business idea. She's unemployed and wants to learn more about EU funding. Next slide, please. So if Chiara launches the app from the welcome page and presses the power button in the Young Entrepreneur tab, she can see the informational tabs, like we saw before, but also this new one, to create her own job. She's prompted to select her region, for instance, let's say is Sardinia. Here she is directed to visit her local contact point of the Enterprise Europe network. This can be a Chamber of Commerce, an agency for innovation in her region, an association, and they can provide her with services to help her develop her own idea, incubate a new company, with a shared office, physical address. So this would be Sardinia Research. But actually, Chiara is very confident in her idea and eager to start as soon as possible. She can then visit the Italian point of single contact, which is Impresa in un giorno, which means company in one day, and complete the administrative procedures. Next slide, please. Now, I believe that PowerToYouth is not just an app. It has the potential to be upgraded to a real business, financially sustainable in the long term. Next slide, please. So that is why I built this business model canvas. The cost structure includes licensing of data for commercial purposes, web hosting, marketing services, and if you believe PowerToYouth is worthy of a prize, then this would help to offset these costs. Next slide, please. The revenue streams come from partnerships with B2B consulting businesses that connect with SMEs and startup incubators that connect to young people. Next slide, please. In this project, the use of open source technology was prioritized. I also had in mind general data protection regulation compliance. And among all datasets used, these were the two most important ones. Next slide, please. With regards to accessibility, I made sure that the color palette was friendly to people who are colorblind. Next slide, please. So thank you for your attention. I hope I could transmit the message of how this platform can make the European Union more cohesive. Now I would like to welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Nuno. Well, the first question we have is, why is this specific age group your target audience?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Why have you targeted this specific age group?
This is the definition of youth unemployment by the Youth Employment Initiative, which is a EU fund by the United Nations. So youth unemployment worldwide is just characterized as people from 15 to 24 years old.
And what are the next steps for your app?
So the next steps would be to launch it as a business with the business model that I presented.
Well, how often is the app going to be updated? Is it updated regularly because of the spending of funds and so on?
With regards to the spending of funds, those were obtained from the data sets from Data Europa EU. So those are normally from each multi-annual financial framework. So if there is new information about the current one, the 21-27, the app can be updated, yes. And also for the funding calls, it is being constantly updated, especially because we are starting a new framework, and I'm sure more funding calls will appear soon.
And finally then, the question I ask quite a lot is, what were the main data-related challenges you faced when developing the data into an application? Did you get access to all the data you needed? Was there any data you wanted that wasn't out there? What would be your call to the data providers to improve?
I believe there is a lot of potential in the data that there is available, especially with the managing authorities of each country. I believe something that would help would be a translation to English in the managing authorities of each country, and also the specification of which units to region the funding calls refer to, because most of the times they are in the description, so we cannot characterize them to the people that actually need them. And also to find the funding calls related to youth, to young people, they are also in the description. So I believe the most challenging part of this project was to actually select the right funding calls.
All right, the data extraction. Well, thank you very much, Nuno, for your presentation, and best of luck in the public vote.